We've talked about vows and we've talked about the precepts numerous times uh, in the past, and but I want to go back in again, and perhaps we'll discover something useful. And I want to begin with a quote. Interestingly, the other day on Facebook, of all places, uh, Shishin Roshi had a quote about vow that I liked, and part of this I was very familiar with, but the context he put it in was interesting to me. He said, "What is it that keeps us on the path?" He said, "Master Rinzai is quoted as saying, 'When walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. But above all, don't wobble.'" I can hear Shishin Roshi saying, kind of growling the wobble, "Don't wobble." And he says that "don't wobble" is the key to living a life of vow. Don't wobble is the difference between a resolution and a vow. And I thought the reference to a resolution was timely because it's that time of the year where we promise that we're going to do stuff that we do for a while or don't do for a while. Um, Throughout this, I'm going to make some references to Zen Peacemaker Order. And Zen Peacemaker Order is a smaller group within Zen Peacemakers. Zen Peacemakers broadly is 5,000 or 6,000 people around the world. ZPO is about 150. And there are teachers and veterans who've been part of Zen Peacemakers for decades. And at this point in time, one student cohort of about 35 students who is about to complete their 2 years here next month, and a second one of 30 plus students, of which our friend Jonan is one. So when I refer to ZPO, that's what I'm talking about. And in ZPO, we have what we call the rule, our rule. And our rule is essentially the precepts, and I'll read this so you know what I'm talking about. It's the 16 precepts that many here are familiar with, plus the three tenets of Zen Peacemakers, and something you may not be familiar with called the five commitments, and I'll read you what those are. We just finished in ZPO revising the language of the rule to make it more translatable, I guess one might say, around the world, more accessible to people who are not speaking English as their first language. And in ZPO, every month we have a session on reflecting on the rule and another one on renewing the vows. So let me quickly go through what the ZPO rule is. And again, you'll recognize some of this. The language may be a little bit different than what you're used to. The three refuges. Recognizing my place in the infinite circle of life, I take refuge in Buddha, oneness, the awakened nature of all beings. Dharma, diversity, the ocean of wisdom and compassion. And Sangha, harmony, the interdependence of oneness and diversity. And then we include the three pure precepts. I vow to do no harm. I vow to do good. I vow to cultivate the awakened mind for the sake of all beings. And then the three tenets of Zen Peacemakers. I will embody not knowing, thereby giving up fixed ideas. I will bear witness, opening my heart to the joy and suffering of life. And I will take loving action arising out of not knowing and bearing witness. Next are the 10 grave precepts. Number 1, recognizing that I am not separate from all that is, I vow to honor life. And this is the precept of non-killing. Recognizing abundance, I vow to appreciate what is and live simply. This is the precept of non-stealing. Third, in the midst of desire and attachment, I vow to encounter all beings with respect and dignity. This is the precept of not misusing sexuality. 4, being honest and embodying the truth as I perceive it, I vow to speak from the heart. This is the precept of non-lying. 5, embracing all experience directly, I vow to cultivate a clear mind. This is the precept of not being intoxicated. 6, showing up with an open heart, I vow to speak without judgment. This is the precept of not talking about others' errors and faults. 7, taking full responsibility, I vow to express my truth without guilt or blame. This is the precept of not elevating myself and blaming others. 8, cultivating generosity, I vow to use all the ingredients of my life. This is the precept of not being stingy. 9, transmuting suffering into compassion, I vow to accept and express my emotions without causing harm. This is the precept of not holding on to anger. And 10, stepping into my life as a Zen peacemaker, I vow to care for myself and others. This is the precept of honoring the 3 treasures. And then finally, we include the 5 commitments of the Zen peacemakers. And these are based on the global ethic that was adopted by the 1993 Parliament of World Religions. And I'll say something else about this in just a minute. There's 5 of these. And this really is an interfaith commitment let's see, how many, 40 plus faith traditions, 200 spiritual leaders from around the world came together in 93, and they all agreed on this. And Zen peacemakers adopted these. I commit myself to work towards a culture of nonviolence and reverence for life. 2, I commit myself to work towards a culture of solidarity and a just economic order. 3, I commit myself to work towards a culture of inclusiveness and a life based on truthfulness. And number 4, I commit myself to work towards a culture of equal rights for all people, respecting and appreciating human diversity. And last, I commit myself to work towards a culture of sustainability and care for the earth. So this rule and the precepts that are contained within it are a vow. Let's talk a little bit about that, what a vow is. But a little background on precepts, and some of you obviously know about this because you've done this ceremony. Traditionally in Zen practice, we study, and then we say that we receive the 16 precepts in a ceremony called Jukai. Diane Rizzetto is a successor of Joko Beck, and she is a teacher at the Ordinary Mind Zen community. And about Jukai, she said, in the formal ceremony known as Jukai, a Zen practitioner openly receives and acknowledges the 16 Bodhisattva precepts as an ongoing path in their lives. And I found her language really interesting. We notice that she doesn't refer to this as an achievement or a conclusion or a goal reached, but rather as an ongoing path, almost as a beginning. And she goes on about the word. And she said, Jukai is made up of, in Japanese, of Ju, receiving, granting, and Kai, precepts. And she says, at a deeper level, the Ju, the Ju part, means to open a space within the core of our being to what is natural and true. She says it is perhaps more like making a space in which the precepts can manifest as what is natural. So in this sense, Ju opens to what is. Then she adds, also at a deeper level, Kai refers to the precepts not merely as rules that keep us straight on the path, but as signposts that point us toward naturally acting for the benefit of all beings. And the way of the precepts, she says, is the path of going beyond the dream of self. It is the path that reveals the truth that our own happiness and well-being are intricately connected to the happiness and well-being of others. I like that language that she uses. For myself, I look at the precepts as descriptions of how, as an enlightened being, I can choose to act. Precepts don't tell me how to be. We're not improving ourselves here, or maybe a little, as Suzuki Roshi would say. And these precepts can be adopted and practiced by anyone, whether they've formally received them or not. Going through Jukai ceremony is not necessary to embrace the precepts. It's open to everybody. Some of you, I think, attended last week when our friend Roshi Nancy Mojo Baker talked about her new book. And at the end here, I'm going to give you some resources. But on the precepts, and she said, oneness with others as well as with ethical precepts frees us from shoulds and should nots. This enables us to become true peacemakers and not just fixers of discord. The Zen Peacemaker's 3 tenets can help take us there. Frees us from shoulds and should nots. Again, personally, I look at our precepts and our Zen Peacemaker rule more as mirrors. If I look and I don't turn away, I can see what it is that I do reflected back at me. And it's often not very pretty. I can see when I'm greedy or stingy or angry or selfish, petulant, impatient. It's a long list. But I get to see that because I have these mirrors of the precepts and the rule. And then I can adjust. I can start again and again and again. There's another aspect to the precepts, particularly the 10 grave precepts, and we won't really have time, and it's not really my point here to go too far into this, but there's some wonderful writing about this, and it's profound, and it can be challenging. But generally, in our teaching, there are 3 perspectives in viewing and understanding and practicing each of those 10 precepts. Taking the first one about non-killing. So in one of those perspectives, the most fundamental one, we might take away never kill anything. Nancy says, period. Never kill anything. We might debate whether that's possible or not, but that would be the interpretation in that most fundamental view of this precept. The second perspective is a relative perspective. And Mojo Roshi says, what if the mosquito is carrying malaria? Makes the question a little less black and white. And then in the third perspective, the absolute perspective, there's no one to kill, no one to be killed, and no killing. Just thusness. In practice, we may respond to a situation differently at different times. So this is quite different from more traditional moral codes. Uh, Mojo Roshi, I love this quote. She said, "The universe does not do good and evil. It does not do pretty and ugly." So these precepts, as a group, point the way to living harmoniously with the true nature of things. And Bernie Glassman said this about these. He said, "The three treasures identify us and point us to who we are, such as being one with Buddha, being one with Dharma, being one with Sangha. And the three pure precepts, cease from evil, do only good, do good for others, describe how the awakened life manifests, or what he said was the order of harmony in the universe." And then he says the 10 grave precepts show us how we practice the three pure precepts, how not to create evil. That's a tall order. Precepts practice is lifelong. We never graduate. We never finish. It's ongoing. It's always changing. And in fact, as we progress in our practice, we see more and more of ourselves and how we are, and the practice becomes that much more subtle and intimate, and perhaps even more difficult. We might get more, and when we have a chance to chat, maybe some of you can comment on this. We might get more familiar with the topography of who we are, but those subtle little places where we hold back and cling to the illusion of self become harder to deal with. So these precepts are dynamic, and they call us to wake up each moment and be responsible. Why would we want to do this? I don't know where I got these three answers to that question. It might have been from Gyoto Sensei. I think it may be something he offered us. But what was said was, living in truth is more whole. Falsity produces suffering. And if we're false about our shadows and unwholesome tendencies, we'll defend and rationalize them. And when we're true about them, we become more healthy and powerful. And we really become aware of, we have feet of clay. Dogen Zenji said, "You don't practice to become enlightened, you practice because you are enlightened." I added, "You don't receive and follow the precepts to become a good or an awakened person, because you are good and awake. You practice the precepts." We're not involved in a self-betterment endeavor in Zen practice. And we will surely break these precepts. We'll forget, or neglect them, or succumb to being selfish. Just like losing our focus of attention in Zazen. So what do? We begin again. We come back. We start counting again, or breathing again, or whatever we're doing. I'm relying on others for some of these wonderful expressions just because they're so good, and I surely wouldn't want to be so pretentious as to improve on them. Daido Roshi said, "Each one of us should keep these values conscious. We should really know what they are. And this is reflected in Zen training today when we make vows to keep the Buddhist precepts and when we periodically renew these vows, making our values conscious and public." There's something really important about him saying that public part. Somehow, it's my experience, when you make a vow public, whatever it is, and it could be something small or something big, when you vow to do something, when you commit yourself to doing something in front of somebody else, it becomes a lot more conscious and a lot more powerful, and it's got a pull, it's got gravity. Uh, Personal example: I used to smoke. I didn't for very long, but I did, and without exaggeration, I can say I quit thousands of times, sometimes multiple times in a day. I'd throw away my cigarettes, then I'd go buy more, then I'd throw them away, and then go buy more. And most of those times when I quit, I never told anybody, so I could get away with it. I could avoid honoring my commitment to stop smoking. After all, who knew other than me? But I did, and I couldn't look away from that. I don't know what to call it. Hypocrisy, maybe. That's a good word for it, I guess. So in our practice, we commit to our vows together. We do it publicly. There's a reason we have Fusatsu ceremony. There's a reason we say those words together. We do it as a community. And what we're doing is helping one another be accountable. Be true. Again, from Daido. Daido said, there's nobody checking on whether you are letting go of your thoughts or sticking with those thoughts. So it has to do only with you and your own integrity, being honest with yourself about your practice. In the silence of your own zazen, only you know whether you are diligently practicing. And it's the same with the precepts, he says. Only you know when you have actually violated a precept, and only you can be at one with that violation. To be at one with it means to take responsibility. To take responsibility is to acknowledge yourself as master of your life. To take responsibility empowers you to do something about whatever it is that's hindering you. He says, as long as we blame, as long as we avoid or deny, we remove from the realm of possibility the power to do something about our lives. We become totally dependent upon the ups and downs that we create around us. There's no reason we should be subjected to anything when we have the power to see that we are the creator of everything. To acknowledge that simple fact is to take possession of the precepts and to make them our own, to give life to the Buddha. And finally, he says, living the precepts is contagious. Realizing the ground of being and actualizing it in our lives is contagious. Your practice transforms not only you, but all those who come in contact with you. Once again, back to Diane Rizzetto. She said, more than simply an ethical system, the precepts open the heart and mind to the wisdom and compassion that lie deep within us all. This I really like. She says, we do not take them or earn them. We receive them as a gift that acknowledges that although we may not always act in accordance with deep intelligence, it is at the core of what we are. And the last quote I want to use here is, it's actually not a quote, I'm kind of paraphrasing her. Nancy Baker suggested, and I really love this, that when we do zazen, when we sit ever so still, when we sit in silence, motionless, we are manifesting and embodying the precepts perfectly. And my belief, and I should have asked her this to expand on it, but I believe that she doesn't mean necessarily just when we're sitting on a cushion. She does say when we do zazen, but as we all know, we're called to do zazen all the time, every moment, whether we're driving a car, talking with our kids, taking a shower, making dinner, or getting angry or impatient. Precepts practice is moment by moment practice. It is immediately and intimately accessible to all of us. So I'll wrap this up by saying, let's do our best together and not wobble. No wobbling. um, and if anybody, I wanted to just give you some resources. If anybody wants to email me about this, I'll respond back with the titles. There's 4 books, but again, we recorded when Nancy Baker was our guest last week. We recorded it, and I think Hoden has it up on Zen Peacemakers. If it's not there today, it will be in the next day or two. And it was an extraordinary hour and a half presentation and discussion. And she's really smart and really charming, and this is what her book's about. And so, if you're interested, take a look at that recording. Her book is Opening to Oneness, Roshi Nancy Mojo Baker, to Shambhala imprint. Another great resource that some of us here studied in a book group a few years ago, The Vow-Powered Life by Roshi Jan Chozen Bays, also Shambhala imprint. Some of you have read The Heart of Being by Roshi Daido Loori. That's a third one. And then Diane Rizzetto's book, Waking Up to What to Do, is another great resource on the precepts. That's also Shambhala. So hopefully some of that helps. Thank you for listening. I hope that was helpful in some way.